Hello, everybody. Welcome to On the Homefront. My name is John Murphy, and I'm very glad to have you here in the studio with us to share some time. Our show this week will end a little early for Red Sox coverage, but we're going to have two good segments. For the second part of the show, we're going to have an update from Connecticut Veterans for Peace. I have them on the program periodically, and they're going to spend their time today talking about some of the destruction that's happening right now to the Veterans Affairs Administration, which is really being trashed. And we're going to have some veterans talking about the impacts in Connecticut and what people can do to protect themselves. That'll be later in the show. And on a little lighter note, perhaps, I'm very happy to have Karen Warinsky back in the house. She's, if you're watching, she's to my far right. I'm very happy to have Karen back on the show many times. She's a writer herself, but I have her here today. She's a curator of a wonderful series called Poetry at Large. And they're celebrating National Poetry Month, which is April. And there's another event coming up at the Vanilla Bean in Pomfret on April 26th with poet Sandy Yannone, who's here sitting next to me. And she drove up here from Old Saybrook. She is their official poet laureate. So thank you for dedicating your energy to words and spirit and for being here today.
I'm absolutely thrilled, John, and thank you, Karen, for the invitation.
So, Sharon, maybe you can kick us off with the whole idea of the month and what it's about and your plans for the season.
And before I introduce Sandy and talk about that, I do just want to update on the National Baseball Poetry Contest.
I mentioned that last week.
20 winners were selected. We had 200 submissions, which was two-thirds more than previous years, and from 37 states. So it's possible that their vision of making this a nationwide yearly event will occur. So I just wanted to mention that. We were happy about that. And I'm happy we're going to celebrate National Poetry Month at the Vanilla Bean on this Saturday, 7 to 9 p.m., with Sandy Yannone, who I'm lucky to have stumbled into a couple years ago on a Zoom during COVID. She was in Ireland, or I don't know, were you in Ireland when that Bale was happening, or were you at home?
I was in Ireland, actually, yes.
Oh, excellent.
And I just participated in this Zoom randomly, and it's a very famous poetry gathering. And she was responding to my poems as I read them, and I'm like, oh, I love that girl. So, she was clapping and looking moved and stuff. So I've sought her out in the last couple of years and have her books, and she's going to share her work today. But let me just tell you a little bit about her.
Sure.
So as you mentioned, she's now the Poet Laureate of Old Saybrook. She has two collections, The Glass Studio, which came out in 2024, and previously to that, Boats for Women. They're both published by Salmon Poetry, which is in County Clare, Ireland. And she returned to Connecticut after a career teaching at the Evergreen College in Olympia, Washington. And we have that in common because I lived in Seattle for a while and she lived out there. I lived in North Dakota for a while. She lived in Nebraska. So we have kind of some connections. It's kind of fun. And she's published widely. I could list all of these places, but Plowshares, Swim Every Day, ABQ in Print, Prairie Schooner are among some of those. And she hosts her own series, which is called Cultivating Voices Live. That's a Zoom on Sundays since March 2020 when, the COVID thing happened. And she's talented, she's funny, she's very sweet. I'm happy and pleased to have her acquaintance, and I think you'll enjoy your interview today.
Thank you for being here.
I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you.
So one thing that I like to do with artists is go back to the roots for a second, is compared to all the art forms you have to express your thoughts and feelings, you chose words and a certain kind of writing. And I wondered what led you to those choices and how you are kind of living them when you had so many choices as a creative person.
Well, my grandmother was a painter, so I actually was very involved up all the way through high school as kind of a visual artist. I painted, using all kinds of mediums. Mm-hmm. But when I was in high school, I had an amazing high school English teacher.
Well, you were lucky to have one.
I was so fortunate. Yeah. I name her in my book. I always give thanks for my mentors. And when I was a teenager, I loved music. I loved lyrics. I was constantly writing down music lyrics.
Okay.
And then I shifted to take a poetry class when I was in high school. And for some reason, I'm not sure entirely why, when I went to college, I didn't take much visual art, and I decided I would try to be a quote-unquote creative writing major. I don't really like the term creative writing because I think all writing is a creative endeavor, but that's, of course, what they called it.
Sure, sure. And then I guess one other part of it is having dedicated your energy to that. How is it to be in a town when they honor you to make you a poet laureate? Can you tell people what a poet laureate does? And in your town, you have it for as long as you want to work with it. Some towns, they have term limits, but they've given you a
Correct.
free hand to follow the muse.
Yes.
So what's it been like to be like a laureate, and how does that work for you?
I first am incredibly honored to have been chosen. I'm the second poet laureate in my hometown, and Old Saybrook is where I grew up. So I
Okay.
returned
Hometown.
after many, many, many years. And a poet laureate, the best way and the easiest way I can describe it is an ambassador for poetry, to encourage people to either listen or write and use their own voice to express whatever they're interested in exploring, and to feel comfortable with that. And it's a way to also connect with the other arts. And Old Saybrook is a pretty vibrant cultural town. It's small. There's only about 8,000 people. But we have the Katharine Hepburn Cultural Center there. Katharine Hepburn lived in Old Saybrook until she passed away.
Right.
So it's really well known. It's a destination. Poetry is a little bit on the fringe of that, but I'm hoping at some point during my term I like to create bridges and connections. And so that's my goal over time. You build small, is to find avenues to work with community members and bring poetry to the forefront just as much as the other arts are. Visual art is very, very prominent too.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, in case you've joined us, we're speaking today with Sandy Yannone. She's going to be at the Vanilla Bean in Pomfret on April 26th as part of the Poetry at Large series. Could you give us a preview of some of the stuff you're going to share? What's on your menu for that night? Give us a little teaser.
I tend to write in series. I grew up on the Connecticut shoreline, and my father was in the Coast Guard, so I'm very drawn to maritime disasters. And one of my very, very large gravitational pulls is to the Titanic disaster of 1912. So I have a series of poems in my first collection, Boats for Women, that is based on maritime disasters, and most of them are centered around the Titanic. And I thought I would start with one of those poems that intersects with another of my obsessions I really love the time period 1880 to about 1920, 1930, and smack dab in that period was a person named Harry Houdini. I wrote another series of poems in this collection, Boats for Women, in the voice of his wife, who was also his life partner as well as performing partner. And what joy it was for me to discover that the Titanic and Houdini could have intersected. And this is a poem that takes some liberty with that possible intersection between the Titanic disaster and Harry Houdini.
Okay, we love it. Take it away.
This is called Bess Houdini Reveals Her Secret to the Modern World. His cruelest of all tricks, irreversible, and no one knew. Before, all sleights of hand, knots slipping, lockpicks under tongues. I remember the taste of metal in my mouth as I bent to kiss him before each death-defying act. How once the pick punctured the wall of my cheek and I bled. Sometimes he got a little out of hand, like the night he performed The Water Can in Philadelphia during the January freeze. The Bergdahl Brewing Company filled his cell with 8 gallons of lager. He escaped, intoxicated, all boast, betting the locals he could make the Titanic disappear. From his armchair, 3 months later, he read the evening headline to me in his confident drawl, "All saved from Titanic after collision." His portrait smiling, handcuffed in tuxedo and leg irons, propped next to him on the mahogany end table. The next day, I slipped out of the house, bought my own morning paper before he woke. The headlines still accused the iceberg, the grainy photograph of the lifeboats empty on White Star's Piers 58 and 59. I stood on the street corner. I knew the full capacity of what he could take from this world and what he would not give back.
Okay. Snaps,
Snaps, that's
we should
really good.
pre-record some kind of Roman Colosseum applause and just have Matt drop it
you
in
need
once in a while.
a synthesizer.
Yeah,
I do want Sandy to also talk about the title of that book, Boats for Women, because it's a metaphor or a simile, or it's symbolic, and I love it. So I want her to
It caught
mention
my
that.
eye, so yeah, Boats for Women.
Well, I'm very interested in history, and I do like to take the personal and the historical and fuse them. I think it creates an interesting ballast in a book. And obviously this is anchored by the Titanic and other maritime disasters, Houdini, there's some other things going on in the book as well. But the title Boats for Women came from a political cartoon of 1912, right after the disaster. The maritime law at the time, of course, was women and children first. And at the same time, the suffragists were calling for votes for women. I saw a political cartoon, and I can't find it to this day. I saw it once, stayed in my head. If anybody knows about the cartoon, has seen it anywhere, please contact me. There was a suffragist standing up in a lifeboat, the little dory had Titanic on the bow.
Right.
And she's standing up there very strident with her hat and her sash. And the sash said, "Boats for Women." So that's where I got the title.
That's awesome. Yeah, I teach the Titanic story in my media class because of the tragedy that there were other boats nearby.
Right.
And a lot of those people never had to die, but the nearby boats didn't have the radios turned on.
Correct.
Nobody heard the distress calls.
The Californian did not have the radios on.
So they changed the rules later, saying if you were a larger vessel with a certain number of people, you had to have somebody on duty 24/7 listening because of what happened.
You can, if you would like, you can invite me next year. We'll have a whole conversation about Titanic.
Okay.
Because I love to talk about the Titanic.
It's an incredible story.
It's an incredible story. And
it's a real metaphor for our culture today as well. Wherever you are in the world, there are icebergs all around. It's a big boat, but the rudder's too damn small. They can't make it move, and problems are ahead. And that's kind of a metaphor. I'm glad you
We
brought
all
that
need
one.
lifeboats at this moment.
And we all need lifeboats. It is an enduring story. It is a timeless story. And I really do feel that the Titanic is this container for really of all culture and all identities and really all life stories fit in. I mean, that's why it's such an enduring story as well.
Yeah.
So
I also want to take a couple of minutes because Karen Warinsky is here all the time, and she's helping other writers connect to audiences, and she's part of Poets at Large. Maybe you should talk about this as an effort across several states for several years. People are trying to breathe new life into poetry.
Well, and one of my goals is to get more youth poets involved. And so to that end, I also do readings besides the Vanilla Bean. We do events at Roseland Park in Woodstock. And our June 15th event is going to feature emerging voices. I'm very excited to have some of younger poets coming to that.
Nice.
I'm doing a little homework next week. I'm going to go to an open mic I haven't been to in New London, and I hope I can make some connections for your show
that'd be
there.
wonderful.
That'll be
Sure.
great.
That'd be great.
But yeah, so I have done things in Massachusetts. I'd like to do some things in Rhode Island. I just haven't broken ground there yet. I do go on a radio show there sometimes.
Very
but
nice.
yeah, I mean, I think we just want people to have a space, and we have a lot of writers in our area. We have a lot of poets. We have a lot of authors right where I'm at in the quiet corner. And then you get out into the wider world of the whole state of Connecticut and then the whole Northeast.
Oh, yeah.
It's always been burgeoning here. Yeah. So it's easy to find people to share their work. I do have sponsors that I'm very grateful for. We have 5 this year. I'd love to mention who they are if we have a minute.
Just we do before we close. Sure.
This year, helping us out is Bank Hometown, Line Master Switch, WHZ Financial Advisors, the Putnam Area Foundation, and Charter Oak Federal Credit Union. And, that helps take the pressure off. That way I can pay the poets because they do drive far distances.
Oh, yeah.
Paying them for their work. Sometimes they sell books, sometimes they don't. We're always hoping people will buy their books. But, so it's sixth year. We're in our 6th year and going great guns. And I'm thrilled that Sandy is finding time to come down and read for us Saturday night. And I hope to see people there.
So I want to give some contact information. If you want to jot this down, to reach Sandy through the web, you can go to Sandra Yannone. So it's Sandra Yannone, YANNONE.com. You can find it about her podcast on Zoom, which is on Facebook. Is that Sundays, you said, right?
It's on Sundays. It's called Cultivating Voices Live Poetry.
Sounds like a lot of fun and like a nice way to end the week, too, actually, Sunday nights. And if you want to stay in touch with Karen, it's Karen.Warinsky, Karen.Warinsky, WARINSKY, at Gmail, and she'll help you find out about all the other events happening in the region. So thanks for coming up, and I hope to see you again. And Karen, thank you very much for all the good work you're doing. Okay? Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again.
Thank you so much, John.
All righty. We'll take a short break and come back with some folks of Connecticut Veterans for Peace. Stay with us. All righty, we're back live here. We're very happy to have you with us. If you'd like to join us to share your story, or if you have news that you want to pass on, you can contact us here. I'm here every Wednesday on WILI. We're also on Fridays on WICH in Norwich and New London. We're on WECS in Willimantic, and our shows are on YouTube. If you go to the WILI Radio YouTube channel, many of the shows are there with playlists, so everything's archived for you anytime. And we're also on Public Access TV Channel 192 at Charter Spectrum. So we're glad to have you with us. For the next part of the show, leading us up to the Red Sox, we're going to spend time that we do once in a while with members of Connecticut Veterans for Peace. They're involved with Chapter 42, and they're veterans who are here to share news and concerns about war and peace, and especially right now, a big focus is going to be on what's happening with the Veterans Administration, which is really being destroyed in many ways. But that's for them to share. I'm going to get out of the way, and thank you guys for coming in again to share the news.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, yeah. And I know Jim Brasile is not here with us today, but he has an update on some of the chapter activities. And I think you have something that you wanted to give an update, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to put a lot of stuff in writing because when I speak extemporaneously, I always leave out something important.
Sure.
So,
okay.
This is what Chapter 42 has been up to recently, the past few months. And we do have a cluster of members out here toward the eastern end of the state.
Right.
And there's a little cluster around West Hartford. We're pretty much all over the place. So, members of Chapter 42, veterans as well as non-veterans, and you don't have to be a veteran to be a member, have participated for many months in numerous vigils in multiple locations to protest U.S. support for the ongoing genocide against the Palestinian refugees in Gaza, and in support of the concept of the right to free speech by members of college communities. These include actions at the UConn main campus and stores, Central Connecticut State in New Britain, Southern Connecticut State, and at Yale in New Haven. We have also joined with concerned healthcare workers who've been very active because they see the damage being done to human beings in Gaza. They've been very active in this movement to call for an end to that war, that totally one-sided war. Okay, I'm ad-libbing now. Look out now. So healthcare workers at Yale New Haven Hospital, Hartford Hospital, and St. Francis Hospital in Hartford. VFP also had a presence at a Hartford Archdiocese March for Life event to promote the idea that all human beings have a right to life, not just yet-to-be-born fetuses. And And a reminder that the traveling version of the Vietnam War Memorial is expected to be in Newington in September, and we want to be present there. So for more information on Chapter 42's activities, you can email VFP, as in Veterans for Peace, VFP Connecticut 42, and that's the name of the state spelled out, not abbreviated, at gmail.com. So that's our chapter coordinator, Jim Brazil, VFP Connecticut 42 at gmail.com.
We send our best to Jim. He's been with us for many, many shows. He's not here today, but he's with us in spirit, and we'll continue to have these guys back in the months ahead. So maybe, Bill, we could shift over to you for a little bit. You and Greg are both going to share real concerns about the VA. Since you're veterans, you've lived through the service, and you'll live through the other side after finishing your service. So share some of your thoughts. People have heard about it. They're still learning the level of damage that's being done. It's still... People are still finding out what's happening. But what have you heard? What is your thoughts?
The dismantling that's about to occur?
Yeah.
I believe that they're trying to get rid of 80,000 employees of the VA administration. Right off the bat, that sounds very problematic to me. And it's probably a method that people use that want to tear something down and privatize it. Let's trash it to begin with and make every veteran who's used to a certain level of service, let's crimp him down so that he can't get the service he's used to. He's going to get unhappy. He's going to say, this isn't working anymore. I'm not happy with what's going on. Then, after they've trashed it, it's easier to bring in the competitive model, the privatization. And I see that they may try to do that with other things too, like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
The knives are out, and they're very sharp.
Well, one thing that's happening in many arenas is there is a concern about the methods that are being used. Some people may agree on a goal of saving money, preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. They all might agree on the goal. But the question is always, how do you get there? And when you do things very quickly, mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. And things are not thought out, even though it's frustration. It takes years to make something this bad or inefficient. You can't undo it in 3 months. It takes a serious scalpel, right? So I guess the thought for you guys is, how are veterans dealing with the side effects of however well-intended some of these cuts are? They're so fast.
Whoa. There's nothing in the way of good intentions behind this plan.
Well, that's a judgment call. But I'm saying, if the intention originally was waste, fraud, and abuse,
that's what they say.
That's right. Well, that's what I'm saying. If that's what they say,
big fat liars.
Well, the performance is. Well, it'll come out in the tea. We'll find out. So my question for you guys is, as you're talking to veterans, what are they experiencing in terms of effects? Things are starting to happen.
Well, Greg and I differ in one regard.
Yeah.
He's never used the Veterans Administration services.
Right.
And I ask you why you never partook of it. I've gotten involved, and I spent many, many years after getting out of Vietnam.
Right.
And I had my own private doctor in Willimantic. And I didn't use the VA, but later on I started normally I'm considered very healthy, but 4 years ago I had a triple bypass, and they did a fabulous job. I feel great. I never felt any pain. It solved my problem. I'm back to where I was prior to the operation. So I had a great experience and no costs involved. That was a thank you because I served in Vietnam. I've been in combat in Vietnam. So I've always kind of wondered why it is that we have to have a system like that, and you have to go to war before you're given what truly amounts to be socialized medicine.
Right.
And, European countries, Canada has forms of medical assistance that's close to that or act right on.
Those are called civilized countries.
Yeah, so we're a pretty rich country, and we can afford it. And you wonder why it's being attempted to be dismantled now. It's scary. I've got a hearing aid. The VA took care of me on that. And any problem that you have, I've had a good experience with the Veterans Administration. And I know for a fact my cardiologist, a young woman, Dr. Amy Beerbon, I asked her personally, and she said, I have actually been in the private sector. And I said, okay, now that you're in the VA system, how many people do you see a day? And she said, about a dozen. And I can comfortably doctor them and take care of them. We have enough time. But when I was in the private system, it was boom, 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 one after another.
Yeah.
She was like in the 20s.
Wow.
Okay? And doctoring takes a beating then.
Yeah.
And that's not right.
That's right. Yeah. Well, what do you think is the poker game? If the intention was to break it up, what's after that that's going to sell it when you've done what you wanted, saying it's going to be better? What's the reality check then?
Well, like Bill has been hinting at, the plan, and they did this with the post office previously, they put a burden on the post office to put aside money for pensions well before legislation had required it. So they almost bankrupted the post office, and rates are going up all the time. Service is declining, and that's the post office's own admission. Expect the mail to be slower going forward. So, yeah, I mean, the plan has been in place even before we learned about Project 25 and before Trump took office.
I mean, 2025?
2025.
Okay, right.
Before Trump took office to start this second term, which is a nightmare for anyone but those who love the guy. If you love the guy, I can't say anything to change your mind. Listen, the plan is precisely to wreck the system and say, oh, we got to privatize it. See, it's barely functioning at all. Let the private sector come to the rescue. This is not a secret, John, and I'm not making up conspiracy theories.
No, they've talked about privatizing Social Security for decades.
Yep.
We now have private prisons, for-profit prisons. So the private sector mixing with government is a movement. But one of the things I heard on an interesting talk show is the private sector doesn't handle every problem, and the government ends up with problems that the private sector chooses not to make money off of. You can't make a fortune off of healthcare without breaking people's budgets. And we privatized it still. I mean, that comes up, and I argue with people about that. We're still looking at that. It's like watching pharmacy ads on TV and realize that's why it's $500 a month. Because they're advertising all these products on TV that you can't buy. A doctor has to order it for you, but you pay for all the advertising, and it has nothing to do with getting healthy.
Exactly.
It's $1 billion thing, and the media really doesn't cover that well because they get paid for those ads.
Exactly.
But that's why some people stress about the cost of care. A lot of this is totally unnecessary. And it wasn't legal until maybe 20 years ago when laws were passed that allowed pharmaceuticals to be advertised. Just like cigarettes used to be.
And boy, do they advertise them all the time now.
Well, they do. And every time you see those ads, that's a cash register clicking somewhere in a pharmacy because they're stuck with very high prices on their end, too.
Ask your doctor about product X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess, where do you want to proceed now? I'm giving these guys time because not all points of view get time to breathe in the media. And if you're not part of a mainstream point of view, you don't always get a chance to share your thoughts. And that's why we have Chapter 42 here a few times a year. Some of the things that you guys are trying to communicate are not welcome in some places. And that's why you're here today, is to have a chance to share that.
I'd like to defend the VA right here in town.
Please.
I have a primary care physician, Dr. Woody Chang, a Korean doctor. He's a wonderful guy. He's got good vibes, and I can go down there to Tyler Square and get appointments. He's watched my PSA number,
Right.
which a lot of males at my age, you worry about that.
That's right.
And he says, Bill, as long as you're linear, it's going to go up a little bit. Let's make sure it doesn't go into an exponential jump. Then you can wind up dying of prostate cancer,
That's
probably
right.
the biggest killer for males.
That's one of the bigger ones,
Yeah, it is. So I would hate to see them pinch it down so that place was only open 2 days a week right here on Tyler Square.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in Eastern Connecticut that use that would then have reduced service, very, very seriously reduced service.
Yeah.
You know, a major part of the problem here is that this administration in Washington is governing by chaos and the whims. After Trump launched his great tariff ideas and the stock market went to hell in a handbasket, he said he doesn't care what the stock market does. And then after the chaos down there continued long enough, he suddenly changes his tune and, okay, we'll delay some of these tariffs and...
Oh, the 90-day freeze.
Right. And all these countries are lining up, begging us to make a deal with them, because he's the great deal maker, right? The Art of the Deal, a book that he didn't even write. He has ghostwriters. And the whole thing is insane, frankly. You cannot know for certain what's going to happen to your benefits under the VA or Medicare or Medicaid or food stamps or Social Security right now. So, sure, let's keep the whole country in turmoil. And some of us are laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh, some people are making money. But, one thing that does trouble me personally is when you look at the numbers of people that have been fired, a lot of those people were there to answer phones from the public, that all of a sudden my Social Security isn't what it should be, or I have a problem, and there's no one to talk to. So you set up an improved system and you force people to use phones, and then you take away the workers who answer the phones, and it just doesn't work. And it's like, why was that forced when you had many other options? Many options. That's what I don't get, is those options.
I have some statistics here that came straight from the VA.
Okay.
Before these changes started being made. This information probably will disappear now. But this is from 2 years ago. The suicide rate among U.S. veterans increased 76% in the 20 years from 2001 to 2021. And the suicide rate for veterans is 70% higher in 2021 than that of non-veteran citizens. Now, this is serious stuff. So the VA has maintained a crisis line for veterans with suicidal thoughts. And this is how it used to be. For all I know, this has been killed. If I was a radio journalist, I'd go to the website, or I'd text them, or I'd phone them and see if this is even still happening, or how long the wait time is to get help. But there was a national number you can dial, 988, if you're a veteran having suicidal thoughts. Then press 1 or text 838-255. And again, this is from 2 years ago. Confidential chat is also available 24/7 at veteranscrisisline.net. So who knows if that's even still being done.
Veteranscrisisline.net.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how many other organizations in their initial approach to them will have the concern for suicides in the regular world? But when you're a veteran, and especially if you've been like a lot of the young guys, Afghanistan,
Iraq,
Afghanistan, and they have a lot of problems, and a lot of suicides result, and for every suicide, there's a lot of people who don't quite make it to suicide. They just abuse their wives or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of family difficulty, a lot of downside from some of the things that the government has asked us to do.
Well, we have to end our show a little early today for the Red Sox coverage, but we're going to have these guys back in the summer with an update as they learn more about the VA changes, what phones are still working, what offices are available to help you figure out your way, because you may be a veteran, you may have friends who are veterans, are all around us. And I know, due to medical improvements, a lot of veterans are surviving injuries that would have otherwise killed them, but now they're home and they need extra care, and now they're compromised for that. So that's the downside of the medical success. Yeah.
Here's one more statistic.
Okay.
Nearly 7 in 10 veterans know someone who's died by suicide.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a heartbreaking way to end right now.
Yeah.
But these guys are with Chapter 42 of Veterans for Peace, and you want to give the email again? So if somebody wants to make a connection, you can do that.
Yeah, to contact our chapter coordinator, you can email him at VFP Connecticut, the name of the state spelled out, 42
Right.
at gmail.com.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming by, these guys. We'll have you back in the summer again for an update, and we'll see you next week.